Welcome to another edition of Conversations with the Expert from 11 Canterbury. Once again, it's a pleasure to be speaking with Izzy Sobkowski. Izzy is a legend in the field of artificial intelligence, working on it for the last 30 or 40 years, which means that he started about the time when I could still beat computers playing chess, a situation that has really changed. So Izzy, the first question I have concerns how do we go about, or how do you go about training, or how is training of these large language systems? How does it take place? How is it done?
First off, Dan, thanks so much for having me back, and as always, for your kind words. Training on large language models, although it's possibly a simplification to talk about large language models as just neural networks, for a moment, we can look at them as neural networks, which means you need lots and lots of training data and either supervised or unsupervised learning. But the amount of training data that a large language model gets these days is pretty much the internet. Now, there are other sources, for example, copyright material or bodies of knowledge that an organization might have. But for the LLMs, the large language models that we typically associate with ChatGPT, et cetera, OpenAI, those are trained on the internet.
Oh, okay, so I've done a fair amount of searching of things on the internet, and it may be a bit of a shock to our listeners, but I occasionally have found a factual objective error on the internet. And I'm wondering, in the training, is there, how do they handle quality control? How do they, do they distinguish between something that's appeared in a refereed science journal from a politician's campaign speech, for example?
It's a great question. In a lot of ways, the LLMs are the Wild West. So we talk about things like hallucinations or bias, and that comes out because there is no there is no segmentation of good and bad. Garbage comes in and garbage comes out, and sometimes it's hard to distinguish a piece of poetry from a scientific fact, or political rhetoric from a study which is done, a peer-reviewed study. It's all data.
So it seems, how do they, the other thing that comes about, it seems like training these is a kind of a time-consuming process. How do they keep things up to date? Are they constantly refreshed? Are they generating their own output? What's happening?
Two things happen. The models are trained periodically. It is not a low-cost thing to do. There's a lot of labor associated with preparing the data, and there's a lot of cost associated with preparing the data. So you don't get models trained, these public models are not trained every day. They're trained once a year, or maybe now a little bit more than that. And that's kind of problematic, but there's something else which is occurring as well, which is a thing called model collapse, where as we start to train the large language models more frequently, we're training them on quote unquote synthetic data. So imagine that these large language models are very good at generating information, and a lot of the information that they generate finds its way to the internet. So now you have information or data which is generated by people, and you have a flood of information which is generated by the model itself. The next time around, you wind up training it on information which has been generated by the model. And if you keep on doing that, you wind up with patterns, you wind up with homogeneous information, you wind up overrepresenting things that are likely and underrepresenting things that are not likely. In other words, you wind up with information which is generally not great. So there are some techniques to overcome that as well. But the training data is quite an issue.
Yeah, it does seem a bit dangerous. It seems also that it makes for an opportunity for nefarious activity to try to shape what you see on the internet and drive drive you in a particular way.
There's opportunity in, anytime there's technology, there's opportunity to abuse the technology. There's lots of opportunity to pollute the data, for example. So a state actor, a nefarious player may generate lots and lots of data on a particular topic to get a point across, very specific, so that when the large language model is trained on this body of knowledge in a particular area, it'll present a point of view, which can be a political point of view, for example, China or Russia or whoever our friends are at the particular day, or whoever our enemies are, that they may decide to pollute, and you have to be careful of that.
So is it are there best practices about how to protect yourself from uh, being vulnerable to this misinformation?
Yeah, I think, generally good research practices are important. First of all, I think it's important, if you use the model, to go ahead and issue a citation as part of an ethical approach to using the technology. So by saying, hey, what I'm presenting to you in this document was I was using ChatGPT as a reference. Just by saying that's a good thing, a citation. And technology, again, needs to be tamed. So if you use the large language models as a good co-worker, or, an assistant, a helper, an adjunct, and get good information, or good or bad information coming out of that out of the large language model, it's incumbent upon the user to cross-reference, make sure that the information is correct, and not just simply to rely upon the answers. Trust and verify. Really, you've got to be diligent to make sure that the answers that you're receiving are correct.
It sounds like we live in an interesting world. Thank you for this update. I look forward to another conversation about how to use these models in an ethical manner in the future.
Dan, that's a topic of mine that I love. Really enjoy the conversation with you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.